It was an unusually busy night at St. James Hospital. Daniel Carter, already in the middle of a long shift, felt the weight of exhaustion on his shoulders. The hallways were packed, doctors were rushing back and forth, and the constant beeping of machines monitoring patients filled the air. Despite all this, he stayed focused, his eyes always attentive to each patient's needs. Around 11 p.m., an ambulance rushed in, bringing an elderly woman on a stretcher. She appeared frail, with visible cuts on her arms and bruises scattered across her face. She was confused, her eyes searching for something or someone but without focus. Daniel, who had just finished processing another patient's chart, was assigned to take care of her. "Name?" asked an assistant nurse, but the elderly woman didn't respond. She just shook her head slightly, as if lost in some distant place. Daniel approached her and glanced at the incomplete medical file. No identification. He knelt beside the bed, his voice calm and reassuring as he asked, "Hi, my name is Daniel. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" The woman looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion. After a few seconds, she murmured, I don't know. Where am I?" Daniel realized this situation required more patience than usual. He asked the medical team to run tests to assess her injuries while he worked on calming her down. Despite the chaos around them, he focused on giving her the attention she clearly needed. When the test results came back, they confirmed that, aside from the physical injuries, there was nothing life-threatening. However, the memory loss and disorientation made her vulnerable. Daniel decided to stay by her side as they waited for more information. As minutes turned into hours, Daniel felt a growing connection to the woman. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Something about her deeply moved him. Maybe it was the vulnerability he saw in her eyes, or maybe it was just the exhaustion of the night weighing on him. But he felt like she needed more than just medical treatment. With the test completed and no clear information about her identity, the medical staff began discussing the next steps. "We'll need to call social services to take her," said one of the doctors, with an indifference that bothered Daniel. He knew that, at that moment, Eleanor, as he had discovered her name to be, needed something more human. He watched Eleanor sitting in a wheelchair, her gaze lost, and a sense of injustice welled up inside him. She was alone, vulnerable, and confused, and the bureaucratic procedures treated her like just another case. Daniel made a decision. Walking up to her, he knelt beside her and gently asked, "Eleanor, how about I take you for a cup of coffee? Sometimes that can help clear the mind." She looked at him, her eyes now filled with quiet gratitude. I think I'd like that." Without asking for permission, Daniel wheeled her to the small hospital cafe. There, he ordered 2 coffees and sat beside her, trying to create a safe space for her to relax. "I know this must be scary, but I'm here to help you," he said, watching her carefully as she held the cup, her fingers trembling slightly. "I don't remember how I got here," Eleanor said, her voice weak. "I have a son, but I can't remember where he is." "It's okay. We'll figure it out together," Daniel replied, offering a reassuring smile. "You're not alone." They spent about half an hour talking, with Daniel gently asking questions, trying to help her recover some memories. Slowly, fragments of her life started to surface. She mentioned having a son, but the details were still hazy. He knew something was deeply wrong, but for now, the most important thing was making her feel safe. Time passed quickly, and Daniel, fully engrossed in helping Eleanor, lost track of his shift and the hospital's rules. However, when they returned to the emergency room, he was met with stern looks from his supervisors. The act of empathy he had shown was about to trigger consequences he couldn't foresee. Back in the emergency room, Daniel felt the atmosphere shift the moment he stepped inside. The looks from his colleagues and supervisors weren't ones of approval but of judgment. He immediately knew something was wrong. "Carter," called the head nurse, James Parker, in a dry tone, gesturing for Daniel to follow him into a meeting room. As he entered, Daniel saw several members of the hospital administration already seated, their faces serious. He closed the door behind him, trying to stay calm. "We want to understand what happened over the last few hours," James began, without any pleasantries. "Why did you leave your post? Why did you take a patient out of the care area without authorization?" Daniel was taken aback by the rigidity of their approach. I was just trying to help. The patient was really confused, and I thought that talking to her in a calmer setting might." "That's not what we're discussing here," interrupted one of the administrators, Sarah Gibson, the person responsible for care policies. "You broke protocol. You should have referred the patient to social services, as per the standard procedure. Your actions were completely outside the guidelines." Daniel felt a growing weight in his chest. He knew the rules existed for a reason, but deep down, he believed he was doing the right thing. She was scared, disoriented. "I just followed my instincts. I wasn't trying to cause any trouble." "Your instincts?" James repeated with a hint of sarcasm. "We follow rules here. Your actions put the hospital in a delicate situation. What if something had happened to the patient? Who would have taken responsibility?" "But nothing did happen," Daniel countered. "She's fine. I just wanted to treat her with dignity." Sarah exchanged glances with the others and then took a deep breath before announcing the decision. "Daniel, your actions were reckless. As much as we value your career up until now, we can't overlook this failure. The decision has been made. You're terminated. Effective immediately, you're no longer part of the St. James team." Daniel's world seemed to collapse in that moment. He tried to argue, but he knew it would be futile. The decision was final. The weight of the injustice crushed him, but he knew that, to them, it all came down to numbers and protocols, not people. Without saying another word, he got up and left the room, feeling utterly defeated. As he walked through the hospital corridors, Daniel caught sight of the elderly woman still sitting in the emergency room, looking lost. He hadn't even said goodbye, and now he didn't know if he ever could. What he didn't know was that this wouldn't be the end of his story. The next morning, across town, Dr. Thomas Wilson was reviewing some reports when he received a call from his mother, Eleanor. Her voice sounded different, more stable. She had been going through a rough time, with memory lapses and a recent fall that had left her disoriented. Concerned, Thomas put everything aside and listened as his mother talked about a young nurse who had helped her the previous night. "He was so kind, Thomas," Eleanor said, her voice trembling but full of gratitude. "I was so scared, so lost. And he treated me like I was someone important, even when I couldn't remember who I was." Intrigued, Thomas asked for more details, but his mother couldn't remember the nurse's name. She just knew that he was kind and had helped her when no one else seemed to care. This struck a chord with Thomas. He knew how sensitive his mother was and how, lately, few people showed the compassion needed to deal with her condition. However, when Thomas called St. James Hospital to thank them and get more information about the nurse who had cared for his mother, he was met with unexpected news. "The nurse who treated your mother, Daniel Carter?" "Oh, he's been terminated," replied a disinterested voice on the other end of the line. "Terminated? Why?" Thomas asked, surprised. "For violating the rules. He took the patient outside the care area without authorization," the receptionist explained, with little emotion. Thomas's anger began to grow. How could someone be punished for showing compassion? He knew exactly what to do. As one of the most successful doctors and the owner of the largest hospital in the city, he had the resources and the influence to fix this situation, and he was determined to do so. The next day, Thomas personally went to St. James. He was an imposing figure, with an air of authority that no one dared to question. As soon as he entered the hospital, he asked to speak with the administration. The presence of a man like Thomas Wilson, known and respected, caused quite a stir among the staff. When he was led into the meeting room, the same faces that had fired Daniel were present. Thomas wasted no time on formalities. "I'm Dr. Thomas Wilson. My mother was treated here by a nurse named Daniel Carter. And I'm here to understand why he was fired for doing what any decent professional would do." The administrators exchanged surprised looks at the unexpected confrontation. They knew who Thomas was and what his presence meant. The atmosphere grew tense, and Daniel's fate was about to change dramatically. The tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Thomas Wilson, with his stern gaze and commanding presence, was there to get answers. The administrators of St. James, who had previously been so confident in their decision, now seemed uneasy. Everyone knew the weight Thomas carried. He wasn't just a renowned doctor, but also the owner of one of the city's largest hospitals. And here he was, questioning a decision that, at first glance, seemed trivial. "We're confident that our decision was based on protocols," Sarah Gibson began, trying to maintain her professional posture. "Nurse Daniel Carter acted outside the hospital's guidelines by taking your mother outside the care area without authorization." Thomas looked directly at her, his eyes filled with indignation. "So, you're telling me that a nurse was fired for showing empathy? For caring for my mother when she needed it most? When no one else bothered to?" Sarah swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the accusation. "We understand it was an act of kindness, but our rules exist to protect patients. And he didn't follow protocol." "Protocol?" Thomas interrupted, his voice firm but controlled. "If these protocols prevent your staff from showing humanity and compassion to your patients, then something is deeply wrong with this hospital." The administrators were silent. They knew they were facing a situation that could spiral out of control, and having someone like Thomas Wilson publicly questioning their practices could bring serious consequences. "I want to know where Daniel Carter is," Thomas continued, "and I will do whatever it takes to right this wrong. You can stick to your cold protocols, but I will not let someone like him, who made a difference in my mother's life, be treated this way." James Parker, the head nurse, tried to de-escalate the situation. "Dr. Wilson, we understand your frustration, but it's important to recognize that Daniel violated the rules put in place for patient safety." Thomas took a deep breath and looked James straight in the eye. "And what kind of safety would my mother have had without him? The safety you're talking about is based on numbers, not people. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my years in medicine, it's that numbers don't save lives. People save lives." The room fell silent, the weight of Thomas's words echoing through the administrators. He wasn't just there to defend Daniel. He was there to defend the very value of humanity within a profession that often got swallowed by bureaucracy. A short time later, Thomas found Daniel in a small cafe near the hospital, sitting alone at a corner table, staring blankly, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. When Thomas approached, Daniel stood up, surprised and slightly embarrassed. "Dr. Wilson, I wasn't expecting." "Please sit," Thomas said, his tone firm but kind. Daniel obeyed, still unsure of what was happening. "My mother told me what you did for her," Thomas began, sitting across from Daniel. "She was lost, confused, and you treated her with more care than any protocol could ever demand. And that's why I'm here." Daniel looked at him, confused. "I just did what I thought was right. I didn't expect it to cost me my job." Thomas nodded. "What you did was more than right, and it shouldn't have cost you your job. In fact, I'm here to offer you something. I want you to come work at my hospital." Daniel was stunned. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "At your hospital? But I was just fired for breaking the rules. Why would you trust me?" Thomas smiled slightly. "Because what you did showed me the kind of professional you are. I need people like you at my hospital. People who know when to follow the rules and, more importantly, when humanity should take precedence over the rules. St. James may not have valued you, but I do." Daniel sat in silence for a moment, absorbing everything that was happening. What had seemed like the worst day of his life was quickly turning into an opportunity he never could have predicted. With a modest smile, he finally responded, "I accept, and thank you, Dr. Wilson. Truly." "Call me Thomas," he said, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Welcome to the team." After the handshake, Daniel felt a deep sense of relief. It was as though the weight he had been carrying on his shoulders had disappeared. He had lost a job, yes, but somehow, he had gained something much bigger. A new opportunity in a place where he would be truly valued. In the days that followed, Thomas kept his promise. Daniel was integrated into the team at Thomas's hospital, a modern institution focused on patient-centered care and emphasizing the well-being of patients, something Daniel had always valued but hadn't found at St. James. The atmosphere was entirely different. The staff was welcoming, the system was less bureaucratic, and, most importantly, there was room for him to be who he really was, a professional dedicated to life and genuine patient care. Eleanor, now recovering, was one of the first patients Daniel saw in his new job. When she recognized him, she gave him a warm smile. "You're back," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't stay away for long," Daniel replied as he checked her vitals. "And I'm glad to see you're recovering well." Eleanor looked at him with tenderness. "You saved me in more ways than you'll ever know. I'll never forget what you did for me." A few months later, Daniel's reputation as a skilled and compassionate nurse quickly spread throughout Thomas's hospital. He became a respected figure, not only among his colleagues, but also with the patients. There was always a kind word, a caring gesture, something that made a difference in the lives of the people he treated. He wasn't just healing bodies, he was touching hearts. As Thomas's hospital grew in prestige, new opportunities opened up for Daniel. Thomas invited him to join patient care improvement committees, where his ideas and experiences became valuable in implementing changes that put humanity first. Daniel, who had once been seen as just a simple nurse, was now a key player in one of the most respected hospitals in the region. As for St. James, the hospital, which had once been the place where Daniel started his career, was now facing its own crises. Daniel's departure and the publicity surrounding his dismissal led many to question the hospital's practices. Former employees began sharing stories of inhumane treatment and neglect of patients, which started to impact the hospital's reputation. The very place that had fired Daniel for showing empathy was now being criticized for its lack of it. Daniel Carter, the nurse who had once been dismissed for following his heart, had now become a symbol of what medicine should truly be: compassion, humanity, and genuine care. Through his kindness, he not only saved Eleanor's life, but also found a way to rescue his own. At Thomas Wilson's hospital, he discovered his true home, where every patient was treated as they should be, with respect and dignity. Daniel's story spread, inspiring other healthcare professionals to never forget the importance of empathy, even in a world filled with rigid rules and protocols. After all, at the end of the day, it's acts of kindness that truly make a difference. And for Daniel, that was more than enough. If you enjoyed this emotional story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with your friends. Your support is vital for us to continue bringing you heartfelt narratives. Thank you for watching.